the stage Jonah Goldberg, Lars Larson, and Tracy Henke.
Guys, welcome again. It is great that we have these wonderful individuals who have decided to hang with us a little bit this afternoon in a more informal setting and to have a conversation based upon your questions. I was going to say,
I'm tweeting you guys.
Tweet from the stage. I was going to say, this is all about new media, so we want everybody to take advantage of it. We have, once again, Essie, Jonah, and Lars, who are, as I said earlier this morning in our morning session, huge voices for economic freedom, as well as huge leaders in social and new media. And so we thank each and every one of you first and foremost for being here. We have had people tweeting in questions, so let me start with the first one. We have an individual with a Twitter handle. This is actually a question that has come in a couple times. This one is M. Newton Tinlin, Twitter handle, who asked, how do we appeal to the hearts of people? Facts make sense to us, but not always to the unengaged. How to make it personal? And Sue Rance has a very similar question, which is how do we make our facts emotional so our friends and family will consider what we say? And I think that that's something that I know at American Star Prosperity Foundation we talk about all the time and would be interested in your all's feedback. So Essie, can we start with you?
Sure. I think there's a tendency to want to divide conservatism into two groups. There are fiscal conservatives and the social conservatives. And that's been a huge mistake. We can't really afford to divorce ourselves or cut our group in half. We have to find ways to bring those two together. And Paul Ryan actually does a great job of this, making the case that social issues matter because they are economic issues. And economic issues matter because they have moral implications. That's the kind of emotional argument, and actually I would encourage everyone to read an essay he wrote in a Catholic publication called Our Sunday Visitor earlier this year, making that case and outlining just how morality, just how closely morality and economic issues are linked. That's the kind of emotional argument we need to be making. We can talk about the deficit. We can talk about balancing a budget. He makes the case that balancing a budget is a moral imperative. We are obligated to do that because when our fiscal house is in order, we can be more generous. We can help other people in better ways. So we have to, I think, take the sort of the facts and the figures and the stats and find ways to give them meaning in our everyday life. Why do they matter to me? Why do they matter to my community, to my church, to my family?
Great. Jonah?
I don't know, I think mockery is really important. I'm tempted to remember that National Review, not National Review, National Lampoon cover, where they had the guns in the golden retriever's head and said, buy this magazine or we'll shoot this dog. That's a good way to make facts known, is just threaten really cute animals. But I am kind of serious about the mockery thing. I mean, one of the things that conservatives have gotten much better at is, first of all, rejecting the premises of the way liberals talk about things. And second of all, making fun of liberals. And making fun of liberals is a really valuable thing. It's not the be-all and end-all. You don't want to just be making fun of people, because ultimately politics has to be about persuasion. But at the same time, I think that one of the ways that you can really sort of get your arguments across is if you have a certain amount of sort of healthy contempt for the arguments from the other side. Because one of the things that the other side has managed to do is establish around themselves an aura of expertise, an aura of authority that's not deserved. And that was one of the wonderful things about Andrew, is, Andrew was sort of like, I don't give a rat's ass if you think so highly of yourself. You have to prove to me why I should think highly of you. And you're doing a really bad job of it. And I think that sort of approach is very useful, because the one thing that a lot of people on the other side of the argument really have a hard time grasping is that theirs isn't the only side of the argument. And if you can do that with humor, it helps win people over. I think humor is very helpful. It helps humanize conservatives because, one of the stereotypes that we run against is that, we're mean and uptight and we need a truckload of brand just to crack a smile. And if you can play against type and be, self-deprecating and all the rest, I think it helps move your arguments in a positive way. I'm all in favor of the moral argument too, but I think, there are a lot of weapons in the arsenal.
I was going to say, Lars, do you have a weapon in
Well,
this arsenal?
I'll tell you, when I was in high school, I was a debater, and my debate partner and I would put together a case and we'd say, to be blunt, it lacks dead bodies. And that's why when I told you the story about the firefighting plane, it sounds all very interesting, and then you say it, real people are dying because of it. I try to show people what the harm is to them and people they care about. Now, when you can show somebody that their family, their friends, their coworkers are going to be hurt by something, that's usually one of the most compelling things that people can recognize in an argument. It's not just some obscure argument about, the state has less money because they waste a lot of it. It's the state has less money because they waste a lot of it, and fewer state troopers on the road means more of your friends and relatives dead from drunk driving accidents. Okay, that's something that brings budget right home to where does the rubber meet the road and how does this actually affect me? And I'm not sure that mainstream news always makes that connection. Sometimes they leave it short. And also about alternatives and choices. If you spend money on this in government, usually it does come down to money. You can't spend it on that. And so what ends up happening is they fail to make that connection that you could make for people by showing how does this policy option that's being considered at the legislature that really seems kind of tedious and dull seem really alive. Show people how they're going to be hurt by it, or people they care about are going to be hurt by it. That will bring it home to hearts as well as because one of my standard raps on liberals is they feel, we think, and I'm a numbers guy. I can't nearly be as funny as SC or Jonah, but if you get to the numbers, you'll be able to tell people this is what's going to happen if you don't do this or if you do that. Leave that airplane sitting on the ground, people are going to die. All of a sudden it becomes a whole lot more relevant to everyone.
Jonah, this question's for you. We have a number of individuals who are writing in. NASA Guy is one of them. Stefan's is another. And they're asking, how do you grow your Twitter followers?
Lots of sunshine and water. I don't know. Twitter is a very strange thing to me. I'm entirely with SE on the idea that it's sort of like my news feed. It's the first. It's weird. I used to check my email first thing, then I would check the corner, and then I would check the corner first, and then email, and now I check Twitter first. And it's a real cultural change because that's where a big chunk of the conversation is going on. But I'm still not clear. I understand what Twitter is. It's a very strange thing. All I do is try to keep the nudity tasteful and integral to the plot, and have fun with it, and I make a lot of jokes on it. And I'll tell you, because there are a lot of bloggers in the room, one of the downsides of Twitter is it hurts blogging, because one of the things about blogging is basically you have one line or one thought, and then you have to hang a paragraph around it to make it coherent. And now you can just have the one line or the one thought or the one joke on Twitter, and it siphons off a lot of the energy that used to be going into things like the corner. And I have to correct myself for that every now and then and say, hey, look, I may have 40,000 followers on Twitter, but we've got, 400,000 readers on National Review Online or whatever the number is, and maybe I should be saying this stuff there. But I have no great recommendations for anybody about how to do it. I just told a lot of jokes on Twitter and people started following me, so my secret.
Essie, what about you?
Well, it's funny, a few years ago, I'm always sort of late to technology. I completely refuse to get on any bandwagon like Facebook until everyone's doing it. And
she got a toaster just last year.
Yeah. And so a couple of years ago, Smart Girl Politics asked if I would be part of their Twitter ball. I had no idea what that was. I said, yes, sure. As it approached, they informed me I'd have to join Twitter to do this. And then I'd have to start using it and tweeting. And so I did. I played around with it very cautiously because I'm very nervous about this kind of stuff. And then of course it became fun and addictive, and now I have social media people that sort of approach me and say, let's really grow this, how can we do this? And they say the key is, and I haven't let them because I really want to maintain autonomy over my Twitter handle, but what they say is you have to tweet all the time, once an hour, so 24 tweets at least a day, which feels insane. I mean, I don't have time for that. But they say that you have to imagine that someone is not on there all day. I mean, they're coming in and out. So if you have something important to say, you gotta say it a lot. And you have to say it to the right people who are then going to retweet you and get you new followers. I like Jonah. I don't know exactly how it works or if there's a magic formula.
I mean, I live tweet my dog walking experience.
Well, and that actually, I mean, live tweeting events, I always pick up a couple thousand new Twitter followers when I'm tweeting through like a State of the Union address or a debate. These are, again, those sort of intimate moments where people want to be talking to their friends about what's going on, and they can do that on Twitter. So if you can really, and maybe that event for you is, the Grammys or a NASCAR race. I live tweet through Duck Dynasty because that is my favorite show on television right now. And, pick up lots of friends who also like what I like. That's, I think, part of the trick to it.
Lars, a different question.
Sure.
We have Mr. Bill Collier is his Twitter handle, who's asking, do you see new media being a vehicle to recreate the local newspaper for a city/town, and what could that look like?
No, you could. You could very easily do it. Because number one, the technology makes it capable. It makes you capable of assembling something that used to take for dead tree newspapers. It would take hundreds of people in a big press shop and millions of dollars and lots of expense. And you can do all that and get better graphics, better everything than newspapers did, say, even 20 years ago. But you have to feed the content in there. There was a little newspaper on the Oregon coast that I just loved, and I wish somebody would emulate this on social media, because it ran all screamer headlines, big black headlines, and that could be vacuous if it doesn't have real content behind it. But they covered this one little town of, 5,000 or 6,000 people, and if something was going on in the town, it was in that paper, and the paper was printed on trees, of course, and so it's gone away. But I thought that same model could be used because it made the town seem exciting. And what I mean by that is they would cover ordinary things like the police are dealing with the giant hornet's nest that's in somebody's backyard, or the zoning commission was in a battle with the guys who pull their fishing boats out and they would park them in their yard and it would bother their neighbors. And they made everything sound like a pretty big deal. And it was kind of fun to read, and I didn't even live in the town. I just thought this was great. And the guy sold a lot of advertising as well, which meant he had the revenue model to make it work. I think you could do that in almost any size town. Obviously, you're going to cover a big town. You're going to need a lot of people. But in a small town, it would actually work better in a smaller town than it would in a big town, and I think it is very doable. Somebody has to figure out, though, and put the energy into putting the content in there. If it's not there, people are going to look at the screamer headlines and say, well, yeah, much ado about nothing.
Just so you guys know, as an FYI, last night we had over 3,000 people that logged on to watch the live streaming. So not just you guys here in the audience, but over 3,000 people have logged on to watch the stream online, and I believe for an average of about 50 minutes. Was their length of time that they stayed on, which is absolutely fantastic. And just to show how Twitter's working, all your comments already, I'm getting lots of feedback on. So for instance, Jimmy BJR has already tweeted, "Whoa, Twitter ball gets a shout out," and several individuals saying, commenting on your reference to blogging and Twitter hurting blogging. And so one of the questions as a result of that comment is, what might be one of the best ways to move Twitter followers to your blog?
It's a good question. First of all, I'm delighted to hear that last night's online viewership was larger than Piers Morgan's viewership. I'm a real conservative. I'm a big believer there's nothing new under the sun, right? One of the reasons why I love good science fiction, one of the things it shows is that the crooked timber of humanity stays the same even though the technology changes and you have ray guns. It's still the same human nature that you had when you had 6-shooters or spears, because the course inside of conservatism is that human nature has no history, right? And for that reason, the technology changes in all these things, but the same rules still apply. You know, be provocative, have good writing, make good arguments. If you want to have more blog readers, write good blog posts. Advertise them well, promote them on Twitter. I mean, so many of these things, if you take a step back and think, okay, rather than how am I going to creatively take advantage of this new media in some sort of heretofore unimaginable way, rather say, how do I apply the obvious lessons about how to do anything in life to this new media? And the same thing holds true. Good writing works whether it's done in ink or in ones and zeros. Breaking news always wins out on the internet. You know, there are lots of people who want to be pundits. There are lots of people who want to write op-eds. But if you want to get attention on the internet, move the story even a fraction of an inch, and you will get eyeballs like you've never seen before. Add something new, not just necessarily a new perspective, because that's getting harder and harder since there are so many perspectives out there, but a new fact. If you can get a new fact out there, the internet will beat a path to your door.
Essie, one of the questions that has come in is how do we work through Twitter and social and new media to help the government operate more like a business?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's a pretty...
Am I about to solve this big problem right now?
That is a big question to come in on Twitter.
Yeah, I think what they're getting at is this idea that the masses can sort of hold the state more accountable, and that because social media has democratized politics in many ways, and the political process, and also news consumption, that maybe we're in a better position to do this. Because you don't have to drive down to City Hall or fly to Washington. You can do this from your living room. And it cannot be overstated, the value of putting a lot of voices saying the same thing together in one space. I mean, like I said earlier, nothing less than revolutions have begun this way. I mean, Sarah Palin, who is Sarah Palin, but Sarah Palin changes policy with a Facebook post.
Exactly.
With a Democrat in the White House. So we're not all Sarah Palin, but when a lot of people have the same thought and the same ideas and want to hold government more accountable, I think that social media, Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, these are the ways that they can do it now. They have access to the really big microphones that only a few people used to have. And if they can coordinate, and as Jonah says, if they can be funny, if they can be interesting, if they can be clever, if they can do it in provocative ways. We've already seen this work. We've already seen social media holding government accountable in myriad ways and for years now.
Tracy,
Yes, please.
let me throw something into this that you can do, because I hate it when I go to conferences and they don't give you actual practical advice how to do it. But off of your comment, Essie, the other night stopping for dinner, I stopped to grab some dinner to go, and a man stopped me and he said,
Get off my lawn.
yeah, well, that was that too. He said, I want to talk to you. And he said, you're the guy on the radio. I said, yeah. And I said, what do you do? And he says, I'm a grant, and he kind of rolled his eyes when I'm a grant writer for Multnomah County, which is the county I live in, or work in. And I said, what's going on? He said, well, they just spent $1 million on this public building to fix it up. And he said, 2 weeks later, we were told they're going to tear the building down and build a brand new building. And he was, even though he may well be a Democrat, public employee, whatever, he was outraged by this. And he wanted to deliver this to me. And he's going to send me the documents, because you just compare the dates. They already knew they were going to blow up the building and replace it when they were spending $1 million to fix up the old one, which is a little outrage, but it's $1 million. if you can go on what I call fishing expeditions, the radio show I do this all the time. For the local show I do in Oregon, Washington, I will be looking for, somebody will tell me that something is going on, and I'll go on the air and say, sometimes I'll just advance it by saying, I don't know this to be true, this is what I've been told, and if it's true, somebody out there knows about it, send me the information. And you can do the same thing because social media acts in the same way that talk show does. And before social media, there really was no way to say, you could go to the obvious people that you think would know about that. Does anybody know why the state is buying, this piece of equipment that they're not going to use when they already have 10 of them sitting in a warehouse somewhere? But somebody out there knows, and even if the person that's on your Twitter feed doesn't know, he knows a guy who works there. And through that kind of chain of communication, you might be able to go out and say, I'm looking for proof of this, I've been given to believe, and then have somebody out there that's watching your Twitter feed call the person or email the person they know and say, look, here's the way to do it, and do it anonymously, which is the other thing that social media gives people, is the way to anonymously narc on the government. The stupid things that it does, where public employees previously really took their careers in their hands and they did that. But that's one way to do it. The other thing that just occurred to me was my producer came to me last week and he said, you want to try something wild? And I'm thinking you could do this too if you really want to. And we're approaching this carefully. He said, what if we created a Twitter account and then we had a contest based on things people write, that would turn over control of that account to one of the listeners to the show for a day or a week or some period of time, and let them, use our, basically tweet out to our entire list, which would be interesting. Now, it's also potentially dangerous.
Yeah, I'm not kidding. Sweden
Yes.
just tried this.
Who did?
Sweden, the country?
I think that's where Tony got the idea.
Yeah, and
It did not go well.
yeah. A lot of stuff about the Jews started.
Oh, well.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hate to do this, but because I have a feeling that we need to do this at next year's conference, but we need to extend the time that we are able to engage these individuals directly with questions through whatever social media venue we are using a year from now. Who knows what that might be? But what I can tell you is that every single comment made by our great friends on the stage have been commented on Twitter constantly, especially Morgan's TV show. That has gotten lots of comments. And so we really do appreciate the time, and I would ask all of you to give Essie, Jonah, and Lars a great round of applause.